Let's talk a little bit about the root or super user in Ubuntu Server. So the root user is going to be like the administrator account on a Windows machine. Basically, the root user has access to everything. It can do just about anything that can be done on the server. And that's one reason that we don't ever want to log in as the root user. Now listen, if you're familiar with Windows systems, then you've likely given yourself administrative access. You may even have given all of your users the administrator privileges rather than just being a standard user. But listen to me very carefully. You need to start off doing the right things. And on Ubuntu Server, the right thing is to never, ever log in as root. I'm making a big deal about this because if you start out with a bad habit, you're going to end up with a bad result. The root user is automatically created. When you installed Ubuntu Server, you specified a username and a password. That is how you should be logging in to Ubuntu Server. As a matter of fact, by default, if you try to log in as root, you can't do it. It's actually locked, which means the account itself is not authenticatable. That means no matter what password is used, you cannot log in as root on your machine. Okay, so if you can't log in as root, how do you do things that only root can do? As a server administrator, there are going to be times that you need access to system files and you need to edit files or make changes that only the super user or the root user can actually do or can actually make. And so what we use is a command called sudo, S-U-D-O. By using the sudo command, you can give your account root privileges for a time without actually logging in as the root user. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about the functionality of sudo, but I really just want this video to be about the philosophy of root itself. One reason that you don't want to have the root account being authenticatable, that is, the reason you don't want root to have an actual password so you can log in as root, is that just about everybody knows that a Linux machine has a root account. So any hacker, anybody who's trying to get into your computer, anybody performing a man-in-the-middle attack is going to know that there is a root account on your machine. What they don't know is whether or not you have been foolish enough to give root a password. Okay? If in fact you've given root a password and then you fall prey to a man-in-the-middle attack, which you shouldn't do if you're using proper security protocols logging in with SSH. But say that that happens, then somebody has just gained access to your entire machine. They can do anything. They have access to everything. You really aren't going to want that, okay? So that's one major reason that root is not authenticatable. Now the other reason is that you can really seriously mess up your system even by accident if you're logged in as root. One of the neat things about using sudo to gain root privileges is that you can do what you need to do, but if you don't need those root privileges, you don't have to take advantage of them. So if you accidentally mistype a command or a path name or something else, no harm at all, because if you didn't use the sudo command, or if you haven't used it within the last 15 minutes so that your password is then stored, if you're only using sudo and those root privileges when you need them, then if you try to do something that would be system breaking, the system is going to come up with a message saying, you need root privileges to do that, so you can't do it. At which point you might go back and say, no, what I was trying to do didn't need root privileges. Double check your commands, double check what you were trying to execute in the shell, because you can seriously break your system. Now, I know for some of you this is basic. I know for others you're feeling overwhelmed right now. For those of you who are feeling overwhelmed, all you need to know is that you never, ever log in as root. Root is by default on Ubuntu Server not authenticatable. That means there is no password. It literally has no password. You can't log in as root, and that protects your system. Don't treat it like Windows. I know most Windows users and even Windows system admins. It may not be best practice, but a lot of Windows system admins are giving everybody administrative privileges. Makes your life easier. You know, people threw a fuss when when the UAC dialog first came into play, the user access control dialog on Windows. People don't like some of these security features because they feel like it gets in the way of their productivity. But here's what I want you to understand. The root user being unauthenticatable is not getting in your way. It's doing a whole lot of good. It's keeping your system secure. So, for now, we're going to be logging in using the username and the password that we specified when we installed Ubuntu Server. We'll be talking plenty more about the root user, also called the super user, I'm not going to show you how to put a password on it. I will tell you, you can put a password on the root user. Please listen to me. Do not make the root account authenticatable. Just don't do it. Instead, use the sudo command. Again, the sudo command is just sudo, and it goes right before whatever command you're trying to access. Now, there are some other helpful tips about the sudo command that I'd like to cover elsewhere. Some ways that you can continue to protect yourself by clearing out your authentication when you don't need root privileges. And also, there are ways to adjust your account and to adjust individual accounts, I should say, to say what exactly they have in terms of root privileges. You don't have to give every user account full root privileges. Now, your account is going to have full root privileges, or it should have full, complete root privileges. And again, we'll cover more of this elsewhere, because you can get into some tricky situations where if root is unauthenticatable, if it can't be authenticated and you can't log in as it, and no user has complete root privileges, that obviously becomes a problem because you've locked your system now and there's no way to get it back to normal. But again, if you're feeling overwhelmed by this, all you need to know is we don't ever log in as root. It's an account. It's there. It can do anything. But we use the sudo command, which we'll cover more elsewhere when we need root privileges. It's very important. That is Ubuntu Server Security 101.